We saw him refuse to take responsibility for the crisis that should have been met with real presidential leadership. Instead, it has cost hundreds of thousands of Americans' lives and pushed millions into poverty. We saw him diminish the pain felt by so many Americans. President Trump said, "We're rounding the corner. It's going away. We're learning to live with it." They are quotes. But as I told him last night, we're not learning to live with it. We're learning to die with it. This is a dark winter ahead. Already, more than 220,000 people in the United States of America have lost their lives to this virus. 220,000 empty chairs at dinner tables all across this country. My heart goes out to every single person who's had to endure the agony of saying goodbye to someone they loved and adored over video chat, who couldn't gather their closest friends, even their full family, to grieve together at a funeral mass or a funeral service. And worse yet, a new study from Columbia University suggests that anywhere between 130,000 and 210,000 of those deaths were avoidable. A leading medical journal in America, quite frankly in the world, wrote an unprecedented editorial. To the best of my knowledge, they've never written anything like this. They criticized President Trump's, quote, dangerously incompetent, end of quote, response, and stated that he, quote, took a crisis and turned it into a tragedy. COVID-19 dwarfs anything we've faced in recent history, and it isn't showing any signs of slowing down. The virus is surging in almost every state. We passed 4.8 million cases. And when Trump was asked this week what he'd do differently to get the pandemic response right from the start, his answer was, and I quote, "Not much. Not much." As many as 210,000 avoidable deaths. But there's not much he would do differently. The United States is 4% of the entire world's population. Yet we make up 20% of all the deaths worldwide. If this is a success, what's a failure look like? We're more than 8 months into this crisis, and the president still doesn't have a plan. He's given up. He's quit on you. He's quit on your family. He's quit on America. He just wants us to grow numb and resigned to the horrors of this death toll and the pain it's causing so many Americans. But he can't erase his own words or deeds. In February, he knew just how dangerous this virus was. He told Bob Woodward in a taped interview, this disease was deadly, far worse than the flu. But instead of telling us how bad it was going to be, according to the New York Times, his administration only gave Wall Street investors a heads up. And they made a bundle, doing something called selling short or betting against the market. So Wall Street knew what was coming, while the rest of us took the full brunt of it. In June, when we began to see the resurgence of COVID-19, I called out President Trump for wavering and waving the white flag of surrender to the virus. But then it was as if he decided to go on offense for the virus, holding rallies with no masks, no social distancing, where people contracted the virus, inviting the virus into the White House, hosting what Dr. Fauci called super spreader event, endangering more people's lives by telling the public, don't worry about the disease, don't let it dominate you. How many people from Kristen in Arizona will end up suffering because their loved one listened to the president? Kristen said her dad voted for Trump, listened to him, believed him that the virus wasn't a big deal. Then her dad became infected and died. Kristen said it was her dad's only pre-existing condition. This is her quote. The only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump. End of quote. Even after contracting the virus himself, Donald Trump still refuses to promote universal mask wearing, which could have saved nearly 100,000 lives and could still save over 100,000 lives in the next few months. The longer Donald Trump is president, the more reckless he gets. We don't have to be held prisoner by this administration's failures. We can choose a different path. We can do what Americans have always done: come together and meet the challenge with grit, compassion, and determination. And today I'm going to tell you exactly what I plan to do if I have the honor of being elected your next president. I'll immediately put in place a national strategy that will position our country to finally get ahead of this virus and get back our lives. I'll reach out to every governor in every state, red and blue, as well as mayors and local officials during transition, to find out what support they need and how much of it they need. I'll ask the new Congress to put a bill on my desk by the end of January with all the resources necessary to see how both our public health and our economic response can be seen through the end. What is needed? Look, a pandemic doesn't play favorites, nor will I. As I said, no red states, no blue states, just the United States, united in our response, united in our purpose to stop the spread of COVID-19 and beat this virus. First, I'll go to every governor, urge them to mandate mask wearing in their states. And if they refuse, I'll go to the mayors and county executives and get local masking requirements in place nationwide. As president, I'll mandate mask wearing in all federal buildings and all interstate transportation, because masks save lives, period. Just look what happened in Arizona. Republican governor initially tried to bar local governments from implementing mandates on their communities. What happened? In June, Arizona got hit with a surge of cases. Hospitals were flooded. The state health system was overwhelmed. So cities and counties appealed the governor's ruling. They imposed their own local mandates, covering most of the state. The result? Cases fell by 75%. Wearing a mask is not a political statement. It's a scientific imperative. It's a point of patriotic pride, so we can pull our country out of this god-awful spiral we're in. And it's a testament to the values we were taught by our families and by our faiths. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Second, I'll put a national testing plan in place with a goal of testing as many people each day as we're currently testing each week, a 7-fold increase. There's a key difference in this campaign between Donald Trump and me. I believe in testing. Donald Trump does not. I believe in science. I believe in public health officials. I believe in the example of other countries which prove that widespread testing is needed to regain the health of our nation, to reopen safely, and critically, to stay open. Every school, every worker, every American should have easy access to regular, reliable, free testing. To achieve this, we need to increase both lab-based diagnostic testing, with the results back within 24 hours or less, and faster, cheaper screening tests that you could take right at home or in school. Look, what we have right now isn't anywhere near good enough. States are still improvising on the fly. School districts are still mostly on their own. And many Americans still don't know when it's important to get a test or how. This isn't beyond our capacity to master. Not if we're directing a coordinated effort across government and the private sector, instead of leaving chaos to reign. We'll manufacture the lab supplies needed to make sure we have enough tests. And we'll tap more of our nation's lab capacity so you can get your test results more quickly. We'll build a national corps of contact tracers to work closely with trusted organizations in these communities that are most at risk. We'll also take steps to ensure that no one has to choose between getting a test and putting food on the table. Look, and that no one is scared that being tested for COVID might jeopardize their immigration status. The only way we'll defeat this virus is if we defeat it everywhere. Third point I'd like to make is we'll close the personal protective equipment, the PPE gap, and get the gear out where it's needed. Every healthcare worker will have a reliable supply of properly fitted N95 masks. It's unconscionable. There are more than 8 months into this crisis, and frontline healthcare workers are still rationing their personal protective equipment. As president, I'll use the full power of the Defense Production Act to drive the manufacturing of personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, gowns, and more, and ensure this is distributed equitably. Look, we won't stop until the nation's supply exceeds the demand and our stockpile is replenished, especially in hard-hit areas and in communities that are disproportionately impacted by the virus. I will appoint a fully empowered supply commander who's in charge of filling in the gaps. We'll make sure we can manufacture critical supplies right here at home so we're not dependent on other countries in this crisis. Fourth, we'll provide consistent, reliable, trusted, detailed, nationwide guidance and technical support for reopening safely and the resources to make it happen. We need a single source of guidance that we can trust, where we know the information won't change for any reason other than the science that guides it. Not political expediency, not public image. It won't be easy as to open or close. Social distancing isn't an on or off thing. And we're learning more every day about the virus and how it spreads. We need to be able to adapt and adjust our behavior to responsibly respond appropriately. But schools and businesses can't make responsible decisions if they don't have the information, the science. It's not just more detailed, effective guidance they need. It's consultations and technical support so people have a place to turn with their questions. It's having a government that's in your corner, not a government that's turned its back on you. And once we get our federal, state, and local governments working together, once there's universal masking, enough PPE and testing to go around, science-backed guidance to help us make the right decisions, then we can get our kids back to school safely, our businesses growing, and our economy running again without wasting another minute. As I said last night, I'm not going to shut down the economy. I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm going to shut down the virus. And finally, we'll be focused on developing safe and effective treatments and distributing a safe and effective vaccine. President Trump claims he found a cure. Well, let me tell you, yet we have 1,000 people dying each day. More than 40,000 people are in hospitals right now battling the virus. Life-saving therapies shouldn't be just available to the wealthy and the well-connected. We need to make sure they're available to everybody, available and affordable. It's also possible we could learn any day that one of these vaccines currently in trial is showing itself to be effective. That will be a wonderful day for our people and people around the world everywhere, whether it comes next week or in the next 2 months. But it will still be many months before any vaccine is widely available. And we need a president who will take responsibility for making sure it gets to every single person in this country in a way that's equitable and accountable. We need a president who, in the meantime, is doing his job to protect the American people. Once we have a safe and effective vaccine, it has to be free to everyone, whether or not you're insured. Let me say that again. The vaccine must be free and freely available to everyone. This is just not one more reason why it's so despicable that Donald Trump is fighting in the middle of a pandemic to get the U.S. Supreme Court to strike down the entire Affordable Care Act, which I worked so damn hard to get the votes for. Under the ACA, insurers are required to cover recommended vaccines for free. So overturning the ACA would mean people have to pay to get the COVID-19 vaccine. That's wrong. Very, very wrong. Unlike Donald Trump, I believe healthcare isn't a privilege. I think it's a right. That's why, as president, I'll protect and build on the ACA by adding a public option that will compete with private plans to expand coverage and lower healthcare costs across the board. I'll bring down drug prices by allowing Medicare to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies. I'll make sure Americans have insurance. Those with insurance have access to free COVID-19 vaccine. I'll direct the federal government to bulk purchase as many doses as necessary of the COVID-19 vaccine so we can provide it free to those who are uninsured, underinsured, or Medicaid eligible. Throughout all this, yes, Mr. President, I'll listen to the scientists and I'll empower them. I know how much President Trump has damaged faith in our institutions, in our leaders, in government itself. We have to rebuild the trust between the public and its public servants. It's one of the most difficult tasks we'll face in the coming years.
Frank, we didn't talk a whole lot last night during this debate thing.
Right.
We're going to talk a lot about it today, I think. But before we get busy, I don't know if you realize it or not, but our time tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, we have an El Clasico.
That's just crept up on us quickly, hasn't it?
Even my son said, "Boy, it seems a little early for an El Clasico."
It does, and I've noticed that some of the publications, major soccer publications, are talking about who needs this one more. And when you look at the state of soccer in Spain right now, and you think about who are the most solid teams, to me it doesn't look like it's either of those two right now, just at the moment, But so who needs to establish themselves more tomorrow?
I am going to go out on a limb. And hear me out, because you're going to sit there and go, "Yeah, no shit. I know. I figured you'd say that." I'm going to say Real needs to go out, needs it more. But I'm going to give you one good reason why. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Zinedine Zidane is going to be out on his ass if he doesn't start putting a couple of wins together. And that's why I think they need him more, because Barca basically has a lame duck manager right now.
Yeah.
It's not really going to matter what he does. He's there till the end of the year, until Xavi decides, okay, he's going to go manage Barca. So Koeman's either a dead man walking or as safe can be, depending on if your glass is half empty or half full. But Zidane needs to string 3 or 4 wins together in a big hurry, and losing tomorrow to to their arch nemesis, their arch rival. I don't think that beating the Eibars of the world is going to make him have Perez not can him.
Yeah, I agree. And it's in some ways it's expected. In other ways, it's a little unfair, because if you look at Real and what they're counting on, it's a lot of aging players. It's a lot of players that, much like Barcelona, have probably passed their prime. And yes, they've got a really good young player in Vinicius, which, I look at Barcelona with a really young, great player in Fati. It's a very similar situation there. But that's not who you're counting on to take you through, 30 games in a season. They still got Ramos as their core in their center back position. They've still got what's his name, the fullback, the Brazilian fullback with all the hair that plays great offense, but not necessarily great defense.
Marcelo.
Marcelo, yeah. You've got Marcelo, you've got Ramos. Both those guys are advancing in soccer age. Ramos still playing at a high level, but Marcelo's dropped off a little bit, and he never was a great defender. He was always kind of a great, overlapping fullback, and he was really good at that, but not so much anymore. And, they've got a couple guys in the midfield that are probably a little bit better quality than what Barcelona has right now, but again, they're older. What they brought in was their expectation that Eden Hazard would be the guy that would carry them, and he's a good player, but he's not going to carry your team at this point.
It doesn't seem like either side is playing with a whole lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with you that Koeman can just kind of point at the fact that he was brought in to clean house, and he's done that. And the expectation really isn't about wins right now for him. It's about maybe developing the young players, and then the next guy's going to come in and take over that team, like you said. Whereas Zidane, he had his success, big success at Real, and there's an expectation that he'll do it again. And it just doesn't look like that's happening.
Doesn't really happen the second time, does it?
No.
Historically speaking, regardless of the sport. The only exception, and honest to God, Frank, I'm reaching a little bit here. Maybe Gruden going back to the Raiders. Maybe. That's the only one I can think of, and the jury's still out on that.
Well, he's got him playing well this year, and he's kind of got his team in place. It took a couple years to develop it the way he wanted to, and people looked at him like he was nuts when he started trading certain players away. But now, he's got him playing well. So we'll see. I mean, if he beat Kansas City, which he did, it's certainly a sign that they've got something going on there.
Dude, I was so happy.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Rivalry with the last year's Super Bowl champs, who was looking unbeatable this year, and you knocked them off. So
I punched them. I mean, it wasn't even like a last second. I mean, they just punched them.
Yeah.
The consensus is Casey just had an off game, and if I'm going to be 100% completely honest, just between you and me and nobody else watching or listening, yeah, they're probably right. However, I'm taking and running with it. Speaking of running with everything, Frank, we had I guess a smaller shit show or a smaller dumpster fire, or not quite a huge train wreck last night. I don't know. I'm trying to look for positives. I'm trying to give anybody any feeling of accomplishment for actually sitting through that shit show we saw last night. Just your overall feeling. We'll talk a little deeper about it, but your overall impression. What did you think about last night?
Well, I may have a little bit different take than you in the overall, but I'm going to start with the negative, and then I'll move into the positive a little bit.
I like it.
The negative that I thought was you had a forum that was going to allow the moderator a little bit more control, a lot more control as it turned out, and a little bit more opportunity to maybe do just some minor fact checking. Not major. I mean, I don't think it was the moderator's job to do the debater's job. The debaters have to kind of go back and forth on some of that stuff. But there was so much, just so much lying. I mean, and clearly, I mean, look, I don't care. I'm not going to debate about it. I don't care what anybody else says. Trump was flat out lying. Most of the time he opened his mouth, he was flat out lying. At best, he was distorting truths. So the moderator didn't really check him too much on that, if maybe at all. I mean, I think she had opportunity to do so. So that was one thing that I would say was negative. On the other hand, I thought that overall the theme of mic muting, even just for the first 2 minutes of the initial response, set a certain tone. And my thought on that was it really did change the trajectory of how the debate went down. And I thought that, you got an opportunity to actually hear people talk about issues, even though somebody was, one of them was blatantly lying about things. You got an opportunity to hear what they were going to say uninterrupted. And I appreciated that. And I thought that the moderator did a decent job bringing them back to questions that they didn't answer or redirecting them from the talking points that they wanted to make. And I'm going to leave the breakdown of each candidate's performance and some of their highlights and lowlights so for us to talk about after this big general overview. But my big general overview takeaway was I honestly thought the moderator on a big picture view, macro view, did an okay job, maybe a little bit better than average job of bringing the candidates back to talking about the question she asked and redirecting them away from things that they wanted to talk about without answering the question. And I think you see some people like Chris Wallace who kind of got run over because of the format of the first debate, saying he was jealous of last night's debate because he could see that it was much more controlled, and that was the way it was set up more than the moderator. But the moderator did take advantage of that to some extent, not enough, but to some extent.
I probably should let everybody know. I had messaged to our group. I was not very pleased with how the moderator handled things. Looking back on it, I may have been mistaken. I actually looking back at it and watching it a second time, or at least portions of it a second time, just prepping for tonight. I agree with you that the format definitely favored the moderator, right? Which should not be the third wheel in this thing anyhow. So just the fact that that had to be done is another argument that we could make. And I agree with you. I think she did a pretty decent job. I think the one thing that she did that I don't think anybody's giving her credit for, myself included, was whenever somebody would feel the need to address an answer that somebody else had given. For an example, Trump was asked a question. Biden had the rebuttal, and then Trump wanted to address the rebuttal. And she would let them go, but she would put a time limit on them. And I thought that was, looking back on it, I thought was very smart.
Yeah.
Because she did allow somebody, it's like, okay, this is what you're going to do. Fine, I'm going to let you do this. However, you're going to do this my way. And I was, she said 10 seconds. Nobody answered for 10 seconds. However, she did put a restraint on them, and she did keep things moving pretty well. And she did, she did a pretty decent job looking back on it. So I probably should, even if it was a bit of a private thing, I probably should throw out a bit of an apology, because I thought she did, looking, like I said, watching it a second time with the emotion gone. I thought she did pretty good. It was nice to see a debate, and I agree with you. Trump was lying through his teeth literally every time he opened his mouth. I still think the best way to beat him is just to let him talk.
Yeah.
And for a good portion of that, that's exactly what Biden did. We're going to start getting into this a little bit, but just overall, who won?
I mean, for the thinking person, and I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be trite about this, but I think for the thinking person or anybody, Biden won. I mean, there are some points that Trump scored, and I'm going to give points to him on certain things as we talk about this today. But I think that Biden won based upon a few things. He had a sense of humor. One of our guests yesterday who joined us and wanted to talk about joking, Biden pulled out a very timely, funny line when he said Abraham Lincoln over here, and Trump didn't know how to joke with that, didn't know how to laugh about it, didn't know how to play it off. It was a good kind of pickup on Biden's part in terms of, Trump saying I've done more for black people than maybe anybody but Abraham Lincoln, and then a little bit later on, Biden used that line against him in a funny way. And Trump couldn't laugh it off, couldn't understand the context of it. That was a joke that landed. I thought that there was good parts by Biden saying, this was one of the big points. Trump would try to drag Biden into these talking points about Hunter Biden. He was trying to drag him into that part. Biden a couple times was saying, I'm here not to talk about my family or your family, but the American families that are out there counting on us. And I thought that was a tremendous line. And I think it resonated when you look at Joe looking into the camera like he always does, and it's very genuine. And lastly, when he did want to get engaged with that, he talked about Trump's taxes, that he's paid 150 times more to China than he has to America on taxes. He has a secret Chinese bank account, that he won't release his tax returns, while Biden has released 22 years of his tax returns. So what are you hiding, Trump? And Trump has no answer to that. He says, I'm going to release my tax returns. And I'll say this, Patsy, even Fox News online, not their live TV thing, but online, I went to the 5 key takeaways from last night's debate per Fox News. The number one was what we're talking about right now. And they said, Trump said, I'll release my tax return soon, which is what he's been promising us. The empty promise he's been giving us for years now. That was their analysis. The empty promise he's been giving us for years now. So when you think about it, there's no substance from Trump. It was all attacks that were landing not very well. And I'll talk about some of his good attacks in a little bit, but and in big picture, Biden was able to handle all those big and turn it back on Trump, or turn it to a point where the American people are going to look at him and say, that's the leader I want. The guy who says, even if I vote for him, he's going to be my president. And if I don't vote for him, he's going to be my president. He very clearly explained how he was going to help every state, including the blue, red states. Trump never did that. Never had any kind of plan as to what he's going to roll out for health plan. I think Biden won.
I agree with you that I think Biden won. I think what made Trump look better than he actually did was because of how low he had the standard to begin with. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, unless he threw a temper tantrum and stormed off stage with his thumb in his mouth, just the fact that he stayed there for the entire 90 minutes would have been a positive compared to the last time he was on stage, right?
Yeah.
So whenever there's not a whole high expectation to begin with, and like I said, and anything that other than a total and complete disaster looks much bigger than it is. It is disturbing that we set a bar that low for the president of the United States. I'm going to go a different way though, and I'm going to look at a couple of the negatives that I saw. First of all, there weren't a whole lot of positives that Trump had, and I think the thing that got me the most, there were 3 things that really stuck out to me the most, that really bothered the shit out of me, and you've known me damn near our whole lives, Frank. I'm a bit of a dick about a lot of things, right? And there is a a certain person in our Discord group who will tell you all the time, we compete when it comes to who can be the bigger asshole sometimes. Right, her and I compete quite a bit at this, and we're very proud of that competition. I should point out.
I might be joining that competition, maybe uninvited. I try to needle people a little bit on there just to get.
You got to earn it, right? You got to earn it, but we will recognize it. I will promise you, we will recognize. We will tell you, welcome to the club at some point. I still cannot believe that we elected somebody who still cannot complete a sentence. Okay, he still just goes and rambles someplace. I still don't know what the whole idea with the pillows and sheets was about, but give that what it was. So I don't think he did a very good job there. I think that Biden missed a couple of opportunities. The first one, well, I don't want to say the first one, but the first one that came to mind, maybe not in chronological order of the debate last night, but one of the things that came to mind was whenever Trump looked at him and they were talking about the separation of 500 and some kids that have been separated from their parents, that whole tragedy. And Trump must have said 4 or 5 times in a row, "Who built the cages, Joe? Who built the cages, Joe?"
Right.
I just couldn't believe he didn't look at Trump and say, "Who put the kids in the cages, Donald? Who put the kids in the cages?" Right? Because it was tailor-made for that.
Right.
That I thought was a missed opportunity. The other thing that I thought was a missed opportunity was whenever they started talking about the Affordable Care Act and the virus, and Joe really could have put it all together, and he addressed it now. We played it before we got on. It was part of the presser today that we had aired before you and I started, where Biden came straight out and said, with the ACA as it is now, because the coronavirus, what do you call it? The vaccine is considered an essential.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
An essential treatment, an essential whatever. There's no cost. It's free under the ACA.
Right.
You're not required to pay for it. He had a golden opportunity last night to say that.
Right.
And he could have blown the roof off the place, and he didn't do that either. And I thought those were 2 very huge, big missed opportunities.
Agree.
You know, and honestly, I didn't even know it until we watched the presser today. Right? I never would have known.
No, I agree with you. I think that he could have easily turned that around on the cages. There was a point where, you know, he kept saying there are 535 kids without their parents, which clearly has happened under Trump at this point in time, and they can't find each other. And that was what he kept focusing on, which is also an very egregious thing. And Trump actually said, and I think a lot of people pointed this out on social media, when Biden said that, Trump said good. And I think, you know, that's going to be blown up at some point in time over the next 11 days, that Trump's response to 535 kids being essentially permanently separated from their family, his response is good.
Yeah, my wife heard that. She lost her mind.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's another thing that I thought the media did a decent job with last night, because the media has done a heck of a job of kind of like not calling the Trump campaign dead. They've been skirting around the outsides of it. But when you look at, we talked about on Wednesday, I think, that it has $63 million left in the campaign fund, which is not a lot to get to the home stretch. It's got people jumping ship. It's got Republicans down ballot jumping ship. It's got workers who are, you know, starting to kind of circle the drain and not want to work anymore. You know, it's got these things that are hallmarks of the dying campaign, but the media will not say that. And last night, I thought that Major Garrett on CBS did a really good job of picking up a point that I thought Trump did a really good job of during the debate, but turning that around on him. Trump did a good job during the debate of cornering Biden with the 47 years of service and 8 years in the vice presidency. And he kept saying, "What did you do? You're a do-nothing politician. You're all talk and no action." And he kept saying that I thought to Trump's benefit, that was a talking point that he was probably connecting with some people, not just his base. Some of his base certainly were eating that up, but not just his base, but people who maybe 4 years ago voted for the outsider. But here's what Major Garrett did after the debate. He said, well, let's talk about this beautiful healthcare plan. Everybody wants a beautiful healthcare plan. I want a beautiful healthcare plan. I would love it if you came out with a beautiful healthcare plan, President Trump. But here's the problem. You've had 4 years to do it, and you've had a Congress that would have let you get it done. And you can blame the Republicans in Congress who said it was a non-starter in those first 2 years, but you're the president. You had the opportunity to use your pulpit and get it done, and you didn't do it. So you're the definition of a do-nothing politician now, especially on the issue of healthcare, which seems to be one of the most important things in this country at the moment. And that's something that I think that the Biden campaign and the Democrats will seize upon in the next 11 days. I thought it was a great catch by Major Garrett. And that's something I wish Biden would have said during the debate, said, well, you've been president for 4 years and you keep telling us about a healthcare plan and you haven't done it, you know? So that was a missed opportunity and a win in Trump's column in the confines of the debate.
Yep.
Post debate, it's going to switch.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. Along those same lines, at some point, Trump called Biden a career politician. This is what how a politician answers you, or some shit like that, right? I forgot what it was. And again, a golden opportunity for Biden just to look at him and said, "Where have you been living for the last 4 years?
Right.
What's been your address for the last 4 years?" You know. So I mean, now that being said, during that thing, it was the separation, the family separation, the kids in the cages, and you could tell that Biden was visibly upset. I would go out on the limb and say pissed off about how that whole thing. And you could my wife made a good point. You know, I mean, she is, you know, the psychologist. Where it couldn't have been 10 or 15 minutes into the debate. She didn't even look at me. We're watching this and she said, "Watch the body language."
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's all she said. She didn't even take her eyes off the screen. She just said, "Watch the body language." And you know, on my floor, whenever I train people, I talk about body language a lot, and a lot of it I lean on her to you know, tell me what the hell I'm talking about. But it was very obvious as this thing went on, and she made a great comment. She said, you know, the first 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, Trump's body language was neutral, which meant he was comfortable. He was, Frank, you do this. You know how people are in a courtroom. You can tell whenever somebody's agitated. It doesn't matter how they answer you. It's how their body's acting when they answer you, right? As it went on, you saw Trump's body language change a whole lot. I mean, it got very agitated. It got very uncomfortable. It was very obvious that he was struggling with a lot of things, and Biden was very cool, and he was very calm, and his body language was very neutral up until they started talking about those 500 and some kids. And then you saw Biden's whole demeanor change, and he got rather emotional about that. You could see it whenever how he was answering, and physically how his body reacted whenever this whole thing came up. So he probably may not have been as sharp as maybe he should have been whenever he was debating.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. There's definitely an element there, and I thought that was an uncomfortable spot. For Biden. I thought he handled it okay. Not great. I agree with you. And
I agree. Yeah.
I agree with you, and I agree with Lisa. Because as I've said, you know, I've worked for nonprofit organizations in the legal world during a large period of time of the Obama administration. We had a lot of work to do in the state that I worked in. We did some stuff on the national level, which was not as big because it wasn't our role. But we would get involved in things like that, especially if it came to our state. And there were people that were migrants that would be affected by immigration policy negatively during the Obama Biden administration. And look, I've never been one to put rose-colored glasses on and not criticize who's in power. You know, politicians and people in power will always tend to run over people who are not in power unless
Right.
unless they're checked. I don't care what party you're from. And that's why it's up to people, lawyers and activists, to look out for people who are underserved and underprivileged and underrepresented. And because of that, you know, nobody that's been in power in America has a great record. And right now, though, it's like, well, Trump does these horrible things, but he can try to point back and say, well, what about what they did? What about what they did?
Right.
He could do it all the way back to the, you know, Japanese being interred in World War II, you know, while we were in war with the Japanese. And it's horrible. It should never be done, of course. But that's not an excuse for what you're doing currently or what you did.
Correct.
What you did was awful, and you need to be held to account for it. So that's where it falls out. And I think that, you know, people are just going to justify that the way they want to justify it. If you're a Trump voter, you're going to justify it the way you want to justify it. If you're a Biden voter, you're going to justify it the way you want to justify it. But I, as a person who work on behalf of, and, you know, any activist that does, is going to say that we have to check power wherever we can. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican. We're always going to have to check that power.
Can always do better.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, there's some other specific things that happened during the debate that I thought were interesting. Trump said he was the least racist person in that room.
I was going to go there. Good for you. Yeah, there we go. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I got some thoughts on it, but what just like immediately take your mind back to that time where he said it. Take me back to the room with you and Lisa. What was going on when he said it?
Well, Frank, you know, like I said, you know, I'm an asshole a lot, right?
Mhm.
And you know me, and I've said it so many times how important syntax is, right?
Yeah.
Your syntax tells you everything you need to know about the person who's saying what they're saying.
I think I know where you're go ahead.
And if you're telling me you're the least racist person in the room, you are admitting that you're racist.
Exactly. Exactly.
You are. You're just quantifying how racist you are.
Yeah, I'm racist, but I'm less racist than the two other people in this room. That's his opinion. So he's already admitting, as you said, it's a beautiful catch on your part. I mean, it's a great point that you're making. He's admitting he's racist, but in his own opinion, his racism does not rise to the level of the other two people in the room.
Right.
But let's examine that.
Wow. Let's not forget, one of them is a black female person. Let's not forget that point, okay?
Yeah. She's a woman who's had to, raise through the media world to get to where she is, which I'm sure was difficult and presented challenges because of being a woman. She's a person of color, which was added to it, I'm sure, as well. So, yeah, you're going to tell her, okay, That's great.
And you're going to look at her and say, I'm the least racist person. Yeah. Mr. Central Park 5 is going to tell you I'm the least racist person in this room.
Hilarious. And then you've got a guy who's your opponent, who just by these two facts alone, let's put it this way. We've talked about this many times before, privately, maybe on the air at times. He was the vice president to the first black president in the history of the United States for 8 years. And he served as the vice president very, I would say, loyally, very supportively, enthusiastically. There was a bond that grew between the two of them. You could see it was like there was a love there. Okay. And I thought last night Trump tried to bait him into saying something bad about Barack Obama when he was asked about, you saw that, right?
Yep.
And he didn't take the bait. He coolly said, you know why I didn't get it as much done as I should have? There was a Republican Congress in place. That was great. But that's one thing, one huge thing. But the other big thing is, who did he choose to be his running mate when it comes time for him to serve? Right. A woman of color. A woman of color. That's who he chose to be his running mate. So, Trump hasn't done that. He hasn't put his money where his mouth is. Biden has. He's lived the life. He's done it by example. He's done it by his walk. And it's a silly statement when it's examined, just very, very easily. dispute it. You know.
Just visuals. Just look at the
Yeah.
visuals. And,
Yeah.
and let's be honest, Frank. Kamala Harris was not the safe pick. It may
No.
have been the smart one, but it was not the safe one.
No.
You
I
know?
mean, think about where the electoral numbers that you need are. The electoral numbers that you need are in the South and in the West, but not in California West. California is a
Right.
safe spot. You
Yeah,
need,
it's as safe as safe can be. Right.
yeah, you need to get, you need to pick up states in the Sunshine Belt, from the South to that part of the West in the Sunshine Belt, and he could have picked somebody there to try to bolster his chances. He could have picked somebody up in the Rust Belt as well, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, because all of those states are going into this process. We're going to be very close, and getting support out of there would have been helpful. So yeah, absolutely. This was not a pick of convenience. It was a pick of, this is who I want to be aligned with.
Yeah, I'll make the argument that it was a pick of faith.
Yeah.
Says a lot about his character. You know, it really does. And I thought he made a very good point. And I think it's a bit underreported. I don't think it's underappreciated. I think it was underreported. Whenever that one time when Biden looked at the camera and said, "Look, you know my character, you know his character." You know, he didn't even try to sell anything. He said, "You already know."
They know, yeah.
And I thought that's one of those underlying things, right? That's kind of like the hit from the album that never gets any airplay, right? It's Foreigner's Jukebox Hero, right? It's a great tune, but you never heard it on the radio
Right.
until like 10 years later. Then all of a sudden, every rock station in the world wants to play.
Because all the kids grew up listening to it from the album, and they put it on there.
Right? It's like people, all the lighters go out on the concert, but you never hear it unless you buy the album.
Yeah.
And anybody who understands what an album is, thank you for joining us. But you get my point, right? I think it's one of those things. I honestly think it's one of those things that's going to fly under the radar a little bit. I don't think is going to get the media attention that the individual attention is going to give it. I really don't. I heard that there's probably, whenever this is all said and done, and they start tallying up the numbers, because the TV numbers, the network numbers, this viewership is that's pretty easy to figure out, but the online ones for some reason take forever, and they got to be doing this shit half-assed, because you should be getting the online numbers immediately before you get the TV numbers, because all you have to do is ask an ISP. But they're talking somewhere upwards of 70 million people will end up watching this last debate. Frank, that's a whole hell of a lot of people when you consider how much damn near everybody in the country already made up their mind who they're voting for.
Yeah.
So are we naive in thinking that the undecideds are as low as they are, or are people tuning into these things because they want to see the shit show? They want to see the car wreck.
I think people are the latter. I mean, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a percent or two higher than we think in terms of undecideds, or let's put it this way, folks who may be leaning a certain way strongly, but then weren't completely dedicated to their vote. You know, they may be like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to vote for this one, but somebody could change my mind between now and November 3rd. And that may be a number that's a little higher than a purely undecided person, if you add the two together. But I think it's really the numbers in terms of viewership is that it's TV that's compelling. And whether it's a shit show or whatever, I just checked the numbers again on Game 2 for the World Series, and the numbers are down again on night 2 of the World Series, which was not last night, but the night before. So last night you had a postponed football game that was between it's the worst conference or the worst division in football right now, the NFC East, where the leading team is a losing record, and every team in the division has a losing record. It was between the Giants and the Eagles, and it's on a night that's not traditionally held NFL football. So that was the only thing really kind of competing with the debate last night. And yeah, I mean, it's much more compelling to watch that debate than it would be to watch two losing football clubs play on a night that's not reserved for NFL football.
I was it Lou last night or maybe the night before? I can't remember who. I think it was last night. Whenever he said the sports viewership overall in the United States is down.
Yes.
Or was that you? No, that was Lou.
Lou said that. It was on the heels
Yeah.
of us talking about how the World Series night one was the lowest viewed ever of World Series viewership. And he did say that. And I agree. And, you know, there's other metrics. There's no doubt that there's not as many eyes on sporting events as there has been in the past, regardless of what metrics you use. But the old-fashioned Nielsen ratings metrics are not really working for today's world because people watch things digitally now. They watch things on devices. They watch things streaming, and they watch just clips and highlights of things as opposed to they're not going to sit down for 4 hours. So it's just, our society right now. You know, I part-time live in the city of Baltimore, and on a Sunday afternoon, you would see people out in the park, this big park near our apartment, or walking on the street, or biking, or running, or playing frisbee, or whatever, during the prime football hours, because nobody wants to sit their butt in front of a TV for 4 hours on a Sunday on a nice day and just watch, you know, a bunch of people play a sport when they could be out doing it themselves. And that's kind of where society is now.
Yeah, and the fact is, people found out other things to do.
Yeah.
Now that which brings me back to a point, and the reason I made that point is I'm going to go out on a limb, and I don't think I'm going out very far or making a very thin limb where I'm a little nervous about falling off and saying that you're going up against an NFL football game, even if they are two garbage teams. And let's face it, the Giants and the Eagles is a garbage game this year. However, New York's the biggest market on the planet. Okay. You don't hit into that market. You don't hit into those numbers if there's anybody other than Trump competing against it.
I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. He's going to put eyeballs on the TV for whether it's you want to see him fall down or you want to see him succeed. Yeah.
No matter what it is, he's going to draw your attention, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of that, I think that's the biggest problem that a lot of these media companies have, these quote unquote news companies who really aren't news companies as much as they are media companies, is because it's hard to compete against the numbers that he can give you.
It is, and on this kind of setting, it was attractive for viewers for the possible train wreck that was going to be there. And I told you guys yesterday, that's why I was going to watch it. And that's why I was going to watch Sunday CBS 60 Minutes, which I haven't watched in a couple of years, because I want to see the possible train wreck there. But, you know, let's go back a couple weeks to the date that debate 2 was supposed to take place and look at the ratings for Biden versus Trump. And I think that maybe some media execs are starting to recognize that. And that is, if it's just Trump, you know, repeating the same old Trumpisms and repeating the same old things that he's had to say for years, it gets old. It gets boring. And, you know, he lost that night to Biden. And do you see that possibly Trump can't sustain the level of interest from the TV viewership, you know, for another 6 months to a year? I mean, I don't see anybody sitting home to say, let me, or switching off of let's say it's a playoff game, you know, of the NFL. And let's say the Giants somehow sneak into the playoffs because anybody can win that division. Now you got a New York team that's in the playoffs. Would people from New York switch off the Giants game to watch Trump?
No.
If it's just him talking about something, right?
Right. He is one half of the comedy duo, right? And he needs the straight man.
Yeah.
Right. He need, you know, he's Bud Abbott. He's Stan Laurel.
Yeah.
Right. Boy, we going back some time. 3/4 of the people watching this have no idea who these people are. But he needs the straight man. Or else the shtick doesn't work.
Right.
Right. And whenever he's the only one on the stage, he's the only one that has the spotlight, it falls flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing there. It's a good point though. It's a really good point. Giants make the playoffs. He can't compete with the NFL. Flat out, he can't do it. However, you put him and Biden.
Yeah.
You put him and I'll do even better. You put him and Kamala Harris.
Right.
People will be crawling over each other.
Yeah.
Trying to see that.
Yep. It depends on context. Context is a big thing. And but yeah, I mean, going back to last night specifically though, aside from those those were the biggest highlight moments, but there was other ones that were in there too. That, you know, when you think back about the performance, was there anything, you know, that either of the candidates said that jump out at you beyond those ones that we talked about, or maybe just talking with your family afterwards that you said, boy, I was glad to hear them address this, or I wish they would have done X, Y, or Z?
My wife looked at me and said she was impressed because they really, I don't want to say impressed. There were a couple of times where Trump really tried to bring Biden's family into the garbage, right? Mm-hmm. And he tried to do that after he failed to try to bring in the socialized medicine, the Green New Deal, all this other stuff, and you know, Biden kind of said, "Look, you're competing against me. I beat those guys. You're competing against Joe Biden, right?"
Right.
And which Twitter exploded and was like, the next thing you know, people were just going, "Joe fucking Biden" was all they were saying, right? It was like, it was the best thing I've seen in a while. But the fact that he was willing to start pulling family members into things, and Biden didn't take the bait, especially whenever Trump's whole family was there. That entire family of grifters was right there. And you're looking at two of the people in that front row who are not permitted to run a charity.
Right.
Right. And Biden didn't go there. And you could say that was, you know, he took the high ground, or you could say that he missed an opportunity. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he took the high ground because it was right there in front of him. He was looking right at them. Yeah. That I think was probably the outlier that we haven't talked about that really stuck with me.
Well, I'm gonna support your point, and here's why. I think Biden was sharp last night. I think he was, you know, he's going to have his stuttering moments because he's a stutterer and a stammerer, and he's going to have moments where he has a difficult time speaking because of that impediment that he has. But he does a great job around it. But I'm telling you that he was very sharp, and I'm going to point to one very, very good example of why. When Trump was cornered on his taxes last night, Trump said, you know, I've paid, and Dark Sage, we'd love to hear your comments on the debate last night. We'd love to. Please do post your comments and we'll talk about them. When Trump said, I prepaid more taxes. My accountants told me I paid $10 million early in advance to my taxes. I paid, and the IRS is very unfair to me. I pay more than most people do because they're very unfair. They come after me, and you know it's untrue that I only pay $750. What Biden did to that, I thought was brilliant because the moderator didn't pick up on it, and I'll be honest, I didn't even think about it at the moment. Biden turned around and said to him, hey man, remember the last time we were talking about this topic? You said you're the smartest person around because you pay so little in taxes. It's not because you're not patriotic. It's because you're smarter than everybody else and you can game the system. So which one is it? You pay so much because they're unfair to you, or you pay so little because you're smarter than everybody else. It's not adding up. Okay. There's no consistency to that message from Trump. And all the MAGA people who loved that message that he gave before and said, he's just smarter than everybody else. He doesn't pay taxes because he's smarter than everybody else. He blew himself out of the water with that. And Biden at 77 years old in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the battle, was sharp enough to pick that up and throw it right back in his face. So I absolutely believe that Biden took the high road on the family. And what he did, as we talked about earlier, was just to turn it on its head and say, I'm not here to talk about my family or his family. I'm here to talk about your family. And that's
Yep.
what the president.
We did get a response, Frank. It's rather large, so I'm going to have to read it to everybody. There's no point in even trying to show that because it's just not going to show up. So I'm going to read it.
Sure.
His statement is, I live in Australia, so I am an outsider to America, but I can say from my observations, Mr. Biden is lying when he claims to want to help minorities. Mr. Biden is no friend of theirs, and neither is Mr. Trump. But I want to know why Mr. Biden keeps flip-flopping on his issues. He claims to be for fracking, then against it. He claims to be for a Green New Deal, then against it. Fair enough. Fair questions. I don't know what that has to do with minorities, but I think he was just trying to get in as much as he can in a short paragraph. So I'm not going to try to tie them all together. We'll take them individually. Because I think that's what he was trying to do. Boy, there's a lot there to die. Mr. Biden is lying when he claims to wants to help minorities. I would like to know what you're basing that claim on, or why you're saying that. While Frank and I address the other two.
I could take a guess at why he's saying that, but I mean, certainly I'd like to know what his actual impetus for saying that is. But first of all, thank you for the question. It's a good question. I think it's, you have to legitimize somebody's opinion in the sense of that's his truly held opinion, and he's willing to put it out there on this show, and we appreciate that. So I think that Biden had been in office when there were horrible crime bills written. He was a supporter of horrible crime bills that incarcerated people of color in large numbers, along with 199 other senators and 535 other 535 other Congress people. No, it's fine. You should be calling him Mr. Biden or Vice President Biden. I think that's the proper thing to say. But
yeah, that is the proper way to address them. So don't be don't apologize.
Yeah, but I think because he was in office during those time periods, and I've I've pointed out the fact that when I was working in nonprofits, we had to challenge the administrations, including the Obama and Biden administration, on how the way immigrants were working, the immigration process was working or not working, to the extent that we were allowed to. We had one hand tied behind our back on that. But I will say this too. During that administration, there were massive roads paved literally to assist people to get out of federal prison with pardons and with early release, and with mechanisms that were put into place that allowed for the release of people way early than their sentence would have allowed for. And I believe it was in the tens of thousands, maybe 38,000. So that's not a lie. We did work on that also when I was in the nonprofit world, because we recruited volunteers in the corporate law firms who wanted to go out and help with these kind of things too. Because by that point in time, Obama and Biden had realized, Obama knew it all along, but the administration realized there was an opportunity to do this and to correct the wrongs of the 80s and 90s with all these really serious bad crime bills. So they started to process the early release of tens of thousands of inmates in the federal prison system, where they could effectuate that change without Congress. They didn't need Congress's approval on that. So that was a big key, because you might got to remember there was a Congress that was against Obama and Biden, that wouldn't do anything they wanted to do for the last almost 6 years of that administration. So I don't see it as a lie. I see it as definitely there was an attempt to help. I see that he had a bad thing in his past and that he recognized it. He apologized for it. He's trying to do better. He, in fact, is doing better. But look, and either you're going to believe that by his actions or you're not. And I can't change that opinion, but I do see that And that's what I would answer just to that specific question. We can move on to other ones, but Patsy, that's my point on that part.
Yeah, the just to follow up on your point, I'm going to make it real quick. Even last night, and last night had to have been probably the third time that I've heard him say that he kind of takes the heat for the crime bill that all what do you say all 100 senators signed. But he again last night did call it a mistake.
Yeah.
So I mean, at least he's owning up to. At least he's holding up to that. His next question is, why does Joe keep flip-flopping on issues? For example, he thinks before fracking than against it. I want to say even last night he said that he's for it short term, but the idea is to get away from it, to wean it out, so to speak. Frank, I'm on a planning commission. I will tell you fracking is absolutely horrible. What it does to your ecosystem, what it does to your small community is absolutely horrible. It's not nearly worth the wages that it's paying or the people that it's employing, which, by the way, in the entire state of Pennsylvania is only 24,000 people. So there's that. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that before we get to the Green New Deal.
Yeah, I do want to comment on the Green New Deal, and I'll comment on fracking after that. I apologize, my dogs are barking at somebody walking by outside. But
so you have a dog.
Yeah. So the Green New Deal was not Biden's, baby. It's Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders' baby. That's one of their big initiatives. And I think the thing that speaks to me about Biden is his willingness to listen to other people, his willingness to open his mind to things and not be closed off to things. Whereas Trump always, one of the things that people that love Trump love about him is that he's a quick decision maker, and that he's going to do what he wants to do, and he's not going to wait for all the bureaucratic red tape to weigh in on something. He's going to just cut through that and go do what he wants to do. Well, that could be good if it really benefits society as a whole, but it could be awful if it hurts us as a whole too. And sometimes you need the counsel and advice of other people. And Biden's willing to listen to the counsel and advice of other people on the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal could, I believe, we have to see how it works out. But I believe, when you build new structures and infrastructure, it's going to take manpower to do that. It's going to take person power to do that. And the workforce is going to grow by training those folks, putting people to work. To maintain it, it's going to do that as well. So that'll help the economy. And Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, is learning from the possibility that could actually impact the economy positively, even though it wasn't his baby. Okay, he's going to be willing to listen to that. So do I think that, he's evolving on that? Sure. Do I think that could be viewed as changing your opinion or flip-flopping? Sure. But when you're running, in American politics, when you're running for a primary to try to win the spot of the party, I'll give a quick example of this, and I'm not going to take too long. Back when Ronald Reagan won the nomination of the Republican Party, he and George Bush clashed so hard that George Bush made fun of Ronald Reagan, saying that his economic policies were voodoo economics, meaning that it was so outlandish and crazy that you might as well go down to New Orleans and get somebody who practices voodoo to try to make that kind of economic policy work. That's how much he was criticizing Reagan's economic policies. Fast forward to after Reagan beats him in the primaries, of course, it's history, we all know, Reagan picked Bush to be his running mate. So was it flip-flop that the two of them would work together after he attacked him so hard on his economic policies? Or was it an evolution in saying, okay, look, I lost on this idea. Maybe I can bring my economic ideas to the table with Reagan, even though his are different than mine, and we can kind of influence this policy together. And that's what I see here with Biden, is somebody who's willing to compromise, somebody who's willing to listen to other people. So that's where I think on that, and we can move into fracking after that if you want to.
Real quick, again, it's just too long to show. Uh, but I do want to address this. If we go to Joe Biden's actual his website, okay, and this is where things get a little convoluted. He does say that the Green New Deal is a crucial framework, and I think that's very important. It's framework, because it powerfully captures basic truths. Yada 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 yada. We go on and on and on and on and on. But it's all right there. It doesn't really say that he's like, wholeheartedly embracing it, but he is looking at, especially the U.S. achieving 100% clean energy economy and net zero emissions no later than 2050. So he does kind of own up to it. I'm not real sure where some of that goes, other than it looks like he's being taken a little out of context. Our chatter Dark Sage, Dark Sage 9117. What they said was, what I meant before was, based on Labor's past, which is what Australia calls the Liberal Party, or the Democratic Party, is the Labor Party, which is suspect at best. Mr. Biden has said many times over the years he wanted to close the gaps between poor and wealthy people, but it seems like he and Labor never did that. What was one thing Mr. Biden ever did for these communities in the past? So it's a question. What did he do? It does not appear that he or Mr. Trump understand their struggle. He went on to say, just trying to explain as best I can and trying to keep up with American politics as best I can, being from overseas. I'll be honest with you, dude. The fact that you're overseas, you're keeping up with this shit pretty good. A lot better than a lot of people here are. What was the one thing that Mr. Biden ever did for those communities in the past, as far as bridging the gap between the poor and the wealthy? Well, healthcare would be one of them. No one goes into poverty more often or deeper into poverty in the United States than they do when it comes to healthcare. It's the number one. It's the driving factor for most of the poverty in the country. And he did his best to get it. The problem is you have an opposing party.
Yeah, and unlike in a lot of countries, and I apologize, I don't know if Australia mirrors England as closely, even though that's the model to some extent. If Parliament is held by multiple parties in Australia, or if it's just a two-party system in Australia, more or less a two-party system like we have here. But with the two-party system that we have here, that other party usually control pretty quickly, or can slow things down by process. It's not even that they have to have the majority of votes. If they have enough votes to slow things down, it can be slowed down. They can filibuster. They can do things like that. Mitch McConnell, during the vice presidency that Biden occupied, made an effort to say, as the Senate Majority Leader, his job was to make sure that Obama did not get reelected. And then once he got reelected, his job shifted to make sure that Obama didn't get any judges appointed or anything else of any lasting legacy. So he was going to try to block everything that the Obama administration did. It really is hard to get anything done when you've got a party that's actively obstructing or opposing everything you're trying to do. But I will say this, beyond the healthcare, which was a big step, and I will reinforce what Patsy said, that I think beyond poverty, healthcare also is one of the biggest causes of bankruptcies in our country. Mm-hmm. When somebody has to go bankrupt, it's because they have oftentimes because they have a large healthcare bill on their credit, and they can't get rid of it, so they get rid of it through bankruptcy. And that was one of the things they tried to eliminate through the ACA, or what's called Obamacare colloquially. But of course, that's been under attack ever since we put it into place here in America. The second thing I would say that you asked for one, we're going to give you two. The second thing that the administration did while Biden was in office was to try to create economic opportunities in cities by giving the Small Business Association loan power, to give them almost free rein to go into communities of underserved populations and to write loans to people who are starting businesses that were either zero interest or basically grants, in essence, where they wouldn't have to pay it back. So they could start a business in their own little communities. Because look, business ownership is a key to changing the wealth perspective. Home ownership, land ownership, business ownership is a key element to changing the wealth gap. And to open the doors to that kind of opportunity is a key to changing that dynamic. So that was present. The opportunities were given, or let's say this, the pathway was paved to do it during the Obama Biden administration. Did it roll out as effectively as I think they wanted it to? Probably not, because you have to remember, you've got people on the ground who are going into these communities, and they have to. I found it difficult when you go into somebody else's community that you don't know really well, how to reach everybody you want to reach.
Mhm.
You have to go out and talk to people. You have to go door to door. You have to knock on doors. You have to go to churches. You have to go to supermarkets. You have to go to places where they are, where they're going to be, and they're willing to talk to you. And then you have to have people in the community that have a voice within that community that's listened to and respected. Because it's always suspect when you come in from the outside, and especially if you're from the government and you say, we're here to help. Well, there's a lot of mistrust, and it's there for a reason. So you don't always land on target when you try to put those efforts out there, but the efforts were there, and there was a good reason behind it and a good valid economic reason behind it to try to help people out of poverty. But I will grant you this, Dark Sage, I will grant you this. Nobody's efforts, as we've said earlier in this show, and I've alluded to earlier in this show, government often falls short, and maybe even intentionally falls short of helping people who are not in power, because the people who have the wealth and have the power are the ones who are catered to all the times, because they're the ones who give the money to fund these campaigns. And that's bad. And that's why we want to get money out of politics. That's why we want to get rid of Citizens United, which is a big, research that when you get a chance. What is Citizens United? Why is the Supreme Court backing Citizens United in the United States? And why does that give power to the ultra wealthy and take it away from the poor in the United States? Research that, read it, understand it. Okay. But that's why we're trying all the time to fight for people who are underserved and underrepresented. I think those folks have a better chance at having their voice heard and being able under a Biden-Harris presidency than they do under a Trump-Pence presidency. And I think it's pretty clear, based upon what we've seen, that Trump-Pence is just out to clearly enrich himself and his family. You see where he's reaching his efforts into, opening new hotels in China and Russia and places like that. His efforts are all around his own economic gain. So it's really not about, helping minorities. It's like, well, if they get an opportunity to work for a corporation in their hometown, great. That's an after effect of me giving a tax cut to that corporation. But it's more about getting the kickback from those corporations' heads or leaders because they're happy with Trump being their president.
Yeah, Dark Sage, I don't think you. I think that, and just give me a chance to explain. I don't think you have the ability to appreciate just how devastating a healthcare bill, a significant healthcare bill, could be here in the United States. It will destroy you. It will destroy your family. It will destroy everything you own. It's that devastating. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's the fact. As far as Mr. Trump not understanding their struggle, I will give you a saying that we have here. I don't know how familiar you are with American baseball, but Mr. Trump is the person who was born on third base and thought he hit the triple. Okay? Day he was born, he was given $10 million. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making that up. That is an honest to God. As sure as there's a God in heaven, that is a fact. He had a trust, a $10 million trust the day he was born. Take it for what it's worth. So that's why he has no idea what it's like to be poor. He has no idea. He probably thinks it's a choice. So hopefully we answered those questions for you, dude. I hope so. If you have any more, keep throwing them our way, especially next week. Frank, it was a great response, by the way. That was very articulate.
It was a very good question. And, look, we're not always going to have people who are as cordial and come on and make those kind of questions and remarks. But look, that's what we're here for. We're here for it to talk and to exchange ideas. We've said it before, even when we've argued with people on this show. We still welcome that. We welcome anybody giving their opinion. Doesn't mean we're going to agree with it. It doesn't mean we're going to not, respond in kind at times. But I welcome it, definitely. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, we definitely thank you very much for your for getting with us and talking. It was a great question, great exchange. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. Don't ever apologize for addressing somebody as Mr. or Mrs. Don't ever apologize for that. We're showing our age, Frank.
Yeah.
What do you think? I'm about out.
Well, I got some funnies for you. I got some.
Good. We need something.
We like to end with funnies, right? This was when the word cocaine was uttered. Watch his eyes.
Oh,
Can you see him?
Yeah.
His eyes lit up whenever the
His
word
eyes lit up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one last thing. This one will be a little bit better. This one will be a little bit better, and you can see this one. I actually got word during our pod today. This is very important. Actually, got to give credit to Trump. He couldn't come up with anything for the last year. I mean, we're almost to a year of COVID right now. When it first came out in China, it's been here on our shores for about 9, almost 10 months. Today, he came up with a plan, and I've been sent. It's go to the https://trumpcovidplan.com. Thank God our president has come out with a plan.
That's what I'm doing right now.
You see it?
So if you type if you go to the URL,
go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely sharing this one. TrumpCovidPlan.com. Here's what you see. Okay. There you go. For anybody who can't read it, please allow me. The Trump plan to defeat coronavirus and reopen safely does not exist. Donald Trump had 8 months to use science, public health, and the power of the presidency to reopen safely and save American lives. But we are barely better equipped to manage COVID-19 threat today than we were eight months ago. Donald Trump has failed to lead and America is paying for it with their lives. There you go. There you go.
So
there you go.
And it's a beautiful, little quote down there. We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China. We have it under control. It's going to be just fine. Donald Trump on 1/22/20. And the beating heart, as you can see underneath that, the EKG or whatever that symbol is.
That's an EKG. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great little graphic, isn't it?
Yep. Absolutely insane. First of all, Frank, that's pretty good. It really is. That's good. I like it.
Good way to end our Friday, our week, right?
You got to have a little bit of levity, right? Even if it is morbid levity. For everybody watching, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget tomorrow, the El Clasico, Real Madrid and Barcelona. Can't forget that. It's huge. Biggest game on the planet. We'll be watching. Anyhow, thank you all very much for joining us. We will be back Tuesday. 2 weeks. Well, no, it's less than that before election, huh? It's the Tuesday before election Tuesday. So it's 1 week before. Holy shit, man. We're getting down to the stretch. Thank God.
We're smoochie away from it.
Next week, Frank, next week's going to be killer, man. You tell you what, you think there's been some drama? Wait till next week. Yeah. Holy shit. Well, you know what? It gives us something to talk about. I mean, we always have soccer, but poor Lou, he's not going to. It's just not going to happen for him. We're trying. Folks, we're trying. We really are. Okay, but this is a process.
Yep.
Okay, this is a process. First of all, he's all-American. We're dealing with soccer. Number two, he's older than we are. So
Tricks, you know how that is.
You know, it is trying to convince an older person to do anything. But anyhow, we will talk to you Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, have a great weekend, and goodbye, good luck, and God bless. We'll see everybody.